Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and in today's video, I'll be running through my transfer plans ahead of Game Week 30. Welcome back everyone to another video. Now, as always, if you did enjoy today's content, it would mean a lot to me if you could just drop a like, hit subscribe if you're new around here, and let's start off by talking about Game Week 29. Technically so far, because I'm recording this before the final game of the game week, but there's not many relevant FPL picks in that match, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. There's not much that will happen. My rank will probably go down by 5 to 10k at most, but it's going to be pretty much a grey arrow this week. Now, I need to apologise first and foremost to Elliot Anderson, because what on earth was I thinking benching such a beautiful, glorious man? 12 points from him. I am so lucky that the other Anderson didn't feature, although he was past fit, by the way, by Marco Silva prior to the deadline. But he didn't come off the bench. Elliot Anderson came off my bench for him with his only second goal of the season, although I did put a post up on X beforehand saying I do kind of fancy an Elliot Anderson goal tonight. It was just written. So 12 points from him. He hit DEFCON, he got the goal, and of course, he got the maximum bonus points. What a performance from him. And I did get a bit of bench jam there, which recovered me from what would have been about a 12-point red arrow to pretty much maintaining my rank for Game Week 29. Now, there was one player in particular that I missed out on with good ownership who really damaged my rank this week. That was, of course, João Pedro. We'll be talking about him later. Semenyo also did quite a lot of damage with just a goal, considering his ownership is extremely high right now, about 80 to 85% at my rank. But a lot of my players did do fairly well this week. Bruno Fernandes, 8 points from him with an assist and some bonus points in there as well. I think he didn't quite hit DEFCON. Obviously, he's very well owned, so it didn't do me much good. But in my back line, I had both Timber and Gabriel keeping the clean sheet. Both of them hit DEFCON, which is rare for Timber. But of course, he picked up the assist as well. And both of them got some bonus points in there too. So 2 big performances from them and 3 double-digit hauls overall in my 11 with Elliot Anderson coming in. Kelleher keeping the clean sheet against Bournemouth was not on my bingo card, so that was a nice surprise. But then we move into the disappointments, and a lot of disappointments in midfield. Rice didn't quite hit DEFCON. Rodgers is just becoming so frustrating to own. 1 point from him. Got an assist chalked off by about 3mm to Ollie Watkins, which is obviously very annoying. And Mbermo picking up a yellow card, not really doing all that much other than missing one relatively big chance and then getting subbed off slightly early as well. So he's been a bit of a misstep as far as transfers in go in the last couple of game weeks. He's still a good player and I do back him to get returns, but it's been a frustrating transfer in, as has Morgan Rodgers, of course, as well. And then in my forward line, Thiago getting 2 points, Haaland also blanking. I had a gut feeling he would start and get good minutes. He did start and got good minutes. So I don't hate my decision making, but the outcome was pretty poor. And I watched that game, and I must admit, I think the goal share for Erling Haaland is starting to creep down a little bit with Semenyo in the side. Obviously, Foden takes a bit of goal share. Marmoush takes a bit of goal share when he's on the pitch as well. It didn't seem like all that many chances were dropping to Erling Haaland. Now, that being said, he still missed a big chance. I think he was very close to getting his toe on the end of another chance from Semenyo, and arguably should have had a penalty as well. So I feel a little bit unfortunate, but there are lessons to take from that match that the chances don't just flow through him anymore. It also does go to players like Semenyo, like Foden, like Marmoush as well. So something to monitor for the future. But if I'd known he played 90 minutes, I would have probably put the armband on him. So I don't hate the decision making, but it is always gutting to see your vice captain outscore your captain. So 62 points from me, thanks to a big helping hand from Elliot Anderson coming off my bench. Thank you again to him. Let's start having a look ahead. Okay, so moving ahead to Game Week 30, this is my team as it currently stands. I've got 2 free transfers though, and I do have a number of players that are scheduled to blank in Game Week 31. So I do need to make some moves either this week or next week. Starting off in goal, I'm not going to overthink it. Kelleher at home to Wolves is absolutely fine. Moving into my defence, 3 home fixtures for Gabriel, Timber and Van Dijk, all relatively decent as well. Everton at home for Arsenal is not a bad fixture for a clean sheet percentage chance. And Van Dijk at home to Spurs, who are really struggling at the moment. Let's see how they get on the Thursday evening. Obviously, I'm recording this just before they play, but they've not been a great side this season. And Liverpool defensively haven't been terrible on the whole. Now, they have conceded sloppy goals. Obviously, they did so against Wolves. But I don't hate the odds of a clean sheet at home to Spurs there. So happy to play all three of them. And on my bench, I do also have Alderete at home to Brighton and Anderson away at Nottingham Forest. Arguably not terrible players to have coming off my bench if I needed them. But hopefully that's not the case. I think it's pretty clear which three I'm going to start. But I will mention here that we do have to monitor the Champions League matches as well at this point. So Arsenal and Liverpool, obviously, I've got three players in my backline that all will be playing in the Champions League in the midweek leading up to Game Week 30. And then after Game Week 30, we'll play the other leg, the second leg of the Champions League tie. So Arsenal have got the brutal turnaround of a Wednesday Champions League game, a Saturday kickoff in the Premier League, and then a Tuesday Champions League game, giving them only 3 days between each match, so minimal rest. And of course, they go up against Leverkusen, so not an easy match. You'd think they play their strongest possible 11 in both of the Champions League games. The only thing that goes in their favour here is that the away game comes first against Leverkusen, then they come back home and they play both Everton and Leverkusen at home back to back. So at least they're not travelling around too much after that away leg is out of the way. So is there a risk to maybe Timber more than Gabriel? Possibly. But I do think that given their position in the league, they're going to try and field their strongest possible 11 wherever possible. So I think the odds of both of them starting against Everton are very high, but let's see how they get on, of course, against Leverkusen in that away leg first. Van Dijk, I'm not going to overthink it. He plays 90 minutes every single week. Unless he gets injured, I'd be extremely surprised if he didn't start against Spurs. So I'm hopeful that of all the Liverpool assets that you could own, Ekitike, Wirtz, Szoboszlai is probably safe actually, but Van Dijk is probably the safest one to be playing through the Champions League double leg. So I think that will be absolutely fine. Moving into my midfield, this is where I'd like to start making some transfers. But again, I just want to reference Declan Rice to begin with, has that tight turnaround. And of course, he's been suffering with a slight injury in the run up to the Brighton game. Do I think there's a chance that he gets benched against Everton? Given their position in the league, given how important every single point, every single win is to them, I would be surprised. But again, I'm monitoring it because they do have the Champions League first leg against Leverkusen to begin with. He could get injured in that game, or maybe he comes off after 70 with a bit of a knock like he did last weekend, and that might just push me over the edge to getting rid of him earlier rather than waiting until game week 31. Morgan Rogers and Anderson both also play in European competition in the run-up to game week 30, so I will monitor them, but I have to admit, both of them are not really on my radar as risks for starting in game week 30. I might be wrong, but both of them tend to be 90-minute men all the way through the season. I would be pretty shocked if they didn't start in game week 30. Now, Rodgers, there's another argument to getting rid of him, and that's because he's been pretty awful as an FPL pick for quite a while now. I said it this time last week in the build-up to game week 29, that he does seem to be a bit of a streaky player, and he will go 5 or 6 weeks in a row without anything and then pick up a mega haul. I thought that might come against Chelsea. It didn't. Like I said, he was very, very close to picking up an assist, but not much else. And Aston Villa's midfield has been generally pretty decimated by injuries over the last few weeks now leading into months, and they've been impacted. So away against Man United, having just played in Europe in the midweek before, is Rodgers a really good pick anymore? I'm not sure he is. The data's not great. And if I had a few more free transfers and we didn't have to worry about the blank coming, I would be selling him, honestly. But because transfers are precious, and anything I do to a player that doesn't blank in 31 now will probably lead me to a hit in another position to make sure I field an 11. It does make it a pretty difficult sell at this point, but I really wish I had a little bit more wiggle room to get rid of him. And arguably, I should be considering him as a sell anyway. But given that at least he plays in game week 31, I think for me, I'm just going to have to cross my fingers and hope that he comes good in one of the next 2 weeks. But my my optimism is not really there on him anymore. Elliot Anderson, again, not going to think that one through. He's been such an asset to me over the last few game weeks. 12-pointer from him last up. He should play 90 minutes against Fulham, you would think. And his baseline should be 4 points. So I'm very happy to own him. Could I see a world where I get rid of him in game week 31 to attack upside? Sure, maybe I'll go after a potential haul there. But for now, it's a good enough fixture that I'm happy to not use a transfer there. That leaves me with Bruno Fernandes and Mbeumo. Bruno Fernandes is arguably in the captaincy conversation with Aston Villa at home. They won't play in the midweek, so they should be well rested. And given that they didn't put out the best performance against Newcastle, you'd think that that rest should do them some good and they'll come back firing against what could be a fairly leggy Villa side. So I think Fernandes is fine. Mbeumo, again, a bit like Rodgers, has been frustrating. I've not owned him for quite as long, so I'm not as frustrated. But last two performances have been anything but positive. And again, if I had a few more free transfers, or if a certain player wasn't blanking in a couple of weeks, I would be looking at moving him on to someone who I believe is in a better patch of form and a bit more upside. So we'll talk about that in a moment. And then up front, you've got Thiago, who realistically I'm not going to do anything with, given that I'm wildcarding in a couple of game weeks' time, and he's got good fixtures between now and then. And then you've got Erling Haaland, who currently I've got as my captain. Away at West Ham, it's a good fixture on paper. But like I said, having watched the match in game week 29, I do really quite strongly feel that his goal share is generally going down, with all of the players around him also picking up quite a large amount of that goal share now. Not as many chances are falling to him. His shots per 90 have reduced quite significantly since the change in formation, coinciding with Semenyo coming into the team. His big chances per 90 have decreased as well. Is he as likely to haul as he was earlier on in the season? I don't think so. But does that mean he can't haul? Absolutely not. He still does get chances. He still does have penalties, and he still should generally have good minutes. So it's always a risk to get rid of a player like that. And he is very, very highly owned and probably will be the most popular captain again in game week 30, considering the fixture. But as I mentioned with Arsenal, Liverpool, Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest, Man City are another team that play in the Champions League in the build up to game week 30. And they've got that really tough turnaround like Arsenal do, where they play on the Wednesday in the Champions League against Real Madrid, followed by an away game against West Ham. So they have to travel to London on the Saturday. I think that might be the Saturday evening, but on the Saturday regardless. And then they go up against Madrid again on the Tuesday. So is there the potential that they rest a couple of players or bring them off early against West Ham? Yeah, possibly. Who knows who those players will be? And of course, they are in that title fight against Arsenal. They can't afford to drop any more points. They're already 7 points off with a game in hand. If they lose another game or they draw against West Ham, then it starts getting a bit out of reach for them. So can they risk not playing their best possible 11 against West Ham? I don't know, but if they're in a comfortable position, could they bring Erling Haaland off early? Yeah, potentially. So a little bit of a doubt creeping in there. And is he as good as a captain as he was earlier on in the season as well? That's another conversation. And I'm not as confident he is anymore, but does that make him a bad captain? Definitely not. I don't think it's as black and white as he's not getting as much goal share and therefore he's a terrible captain. But I do just wonder if it brings him down a little bit of a notch in my expectations or my estimations. And does it put him more in line with someone like Bruno Fernandes in the captaincy conversation? And therefore, could I potentially sell him? Okay, so just leaning on that last point on selling Erling Haaland potentially, because I've got 2 free transfers, something has occurred to me that I could get rid of 2 players who potentially blank in game week 31 in Erling Haaland and Declan Rice. Maybe their minutes will get managed in game week 30, considering they do both have very tight turnarounds after the Champions League first leg and before the Champions League second leg, of course. So especially with Erling Haaland, is there a chance that he gets reduced minutes against West Ham? Possibly, like I said. Declan Rice, maybe less so, but let's see how he gets through that first leg away at Leverkusen. And then, of course, they blank. So with that in mind, given I can do this without needing a hit, is there an argument to get rid of them both and transfer in João Pedro ahead of Newcastle at home, who haven't been great defensively, and then Everton away, And then, of course, I'm wildcarding after that, so I don't need to worry about Man City and Man United after that. He is in unbelievably good form, and it does feel incredibly like points chasing to bring him in now after a 19-pointer. But even before that, he was starting to become quite talismanic for Chelsea. And just looking at the numbers, the last 5 or 6 game weeks in a row, he has put up incredible underlying data. I don't think this is a flash in the pan, and I don't necessarily think this is going to change anytime soon. The only thing that might put me off João Pedro is because Chelsea also have to play in Europe in the build-up to Game Week 30 and afterwards. Let me just check what the turnaround is. Yeah, so they go up against PSG on the Wednesday away, followed by Newcastle at home on the Saturday as well, and then again on the Tuesday against PSG at home. So although they do at least have 2 home games in a row, Newcastle then PSG, it is a tight turnaround. Could they maybe rotate João Pedro and play Liam Delap, for example, up top? Maybe, but he's been so good that I think the risk is fairly minimal. I don't know. If you're a Chelsea fan, do let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your opinion on this, on whether you think João Pedro is a lock to start against Newcastle. And obviously, I would wait until after that first leg against PSG is out of the way anyway, because he could get injured. You never know. But I am tempted if he gets through that one unscathed, and if Chelsea fans are confident that he plays, and maybe we're not quite so confident on Erling Haaland, then making that move might be quite an interesting double swap, because I think it also would provide me with a really differential captain in Mo Salah. Okay, right, so we'll talk about Mo Salah. I've got 2 game weeks here that I want to attack the best possible captain, and I can already feel the comments being written as I'm saying this. But as a differential, Spurs at home, Brighton away, as a potential captain, I don't hate it. Now, is he the player he was last year? Absolutely not. Is his goal share anywhere near as good as it used to be? Again, definitely not. But if I feel like he plays good minutes in both of those games, they're both good enough matches that he could just get a bit lucky and get a couple of penalties across the both of them. And if he does, I think he'll be under 10, 20% ownership. And if I've captained him, then I get effectively 180% of that player. And we know that he's got the potential of that upside. All he needs to do is get a lucky penalty and then maybe spam an assist to Ekatike or something. And he's coming away with a double-digit haul in either of those 2 games. His underlying data is, for Mo Salah's standards anyway, pretty abysmal. 0.55, including the penalty share as well, has been poor. But he did at least score in Game Week 29. He has started to get better minutes recently. I don't know. It would be basically because I'm chasing rank a little bit. And I do feel like I need to differentiate a little bit now to regain the points that I need to get to a top 100k finish. Do I need to twist this much? Do I need to differentiate myself from the pack by this much? I don't know. I don't know whether it's worth taking a risk this big when Mo Salah hasn't really shown us anywhere near the amount of form required to take a gamble against Erling Haaland when he's still got West Ham. So again, feel free to comment below whether or not you think I've gone completely insane, but it is playing on my mind that if these 2 players get through unscathed in the Champions League and Erling Haaland might be a slight doubt, then there's a possibility that I do differentiate myself and go big and try and gain all of the rank back in a couple of game weeks with Salah going big, hopefully. And obviously, João Pedro has been fantastic too. The one thing to note is I definitely wouldn't make this transfer early or these transfers early, especially not until Man City and Newcastle have played in the FA Cup. Because if they play and Newcastle beat Man City, then Erling Haaland may not blank in Game Week 31. And if that's the case, then getting rid of him seems like a really, really foolish move. So I won't be moving early. I will wait until the FA Cup is out of the way and we'll play it by ear from there. But for now, it's at least a possibility, and therefore I thought I'd mention it. Okay, so whilst we're on the subject of Man City potentially not blanking in Game Week 31, it is an outside chance at best, but we should get that information before we get to the Game Week 30 deadline. So I just want to reference it in case it does happen that they do go out and for whatever reason, the Premier League feel like they can reschedule the Crystal Palace game within Game Week 31. If that is the case, then Semenyo wouldn't blank And all of a sudden, Erling Haaland wouldn't blank either. So I can actually start using my transfers more aggressively before I wildcard, because all of a sudden there aren't that many blank players to get rid of, and I can probably bench the majority of them. So I could probably bring in Semenyo for someone like Brian Mbeumo. Now, ideally, I wouldn't sell Mbeumo because I do still think he's got something to offer against Villa and Bournemouth before I wildcard. I don't just think he's turned into an awful FPL player, but unfortunately, I'm 0.1 short of doing either Declan Rice or Morgan Rogers up to Semenyo. Otherwise, I would do one of those two moves very, very easily. Probably Declan Rice because he blanks, but either of them I'd be much more comfortable with than selling Mbeumo for Semenyo. But if Semenyo didn't blank in game week 31, it's a big if, but again, just referencing it in case it does come to pass, then I think Mbeumo to Semenyo, considering the form Semenyo's in, considering the goal share that he's getting at Man City, I think I'd go for it because I do like the next two fixtures. West Ham away, Crystal Palace after that. It's a good couple of game weeks, and everything I've seen from Semenyo so far suggests that it should continue and the minutes should be decent. Now, what I will say against Semenyo is, well, number one, he might blank, but taking that as a given. Number two is he is registered for the Champions League next phase, so he can play both home and away against Real Madrid. Will that affect his potential for minutes against West Ham? Maybe. But he's a pretty fit guy. Like, I don't think he's going to need rotating in and out all that much. And because he's not had to play in the Champions League up until this point, he's been rested in a number of the matches. So surely he should be pretty fit and ready to go against West Ham as well. And he can probably cope with 3 matches in the space of 6 days for the first time in a little while. So again, big if Man City, for whatever reason, don't blank in game week 31 and we get that news before the game week 30 deadline, this is very much on my radar. Okay, the other thing I wanted to monitor ahead of game week 30, of course, is Declan Rice and whether or not I feel like his minutes will be good against Everton in game week 30. I think we've reached the point now where if I do feel confident of his minutes against Everton, and at the moment we've got no reason to not be confident, I'll probably hold on to him for one more game week and then just sell him ahead of game week 31. I think that's the optimal time if you've still got Declan Rice to be getting rid of him. But let's say he comes through that Leverkusen match with a bit of a knock, then this move can be brought forward and we can look at someone like Harry Wilson, Sharda or Altara or Tavernier at Bournemouth. And I just wanted to reference it in case that did happen. One of these 3 players will likely be my transfer in for Rice ahead of game week 31 anyway. It looks likely that Wilson is the best pick by that point, considering it would be a 1-week punt and he's got the best fixture, Burnley at home. And I do really like him as a player. I ideally wanted to buy him ahead of game week 29, but of course, there was just too much doubt around his fitness. So I think if I leave it until game week 31, he becomes the obvious pick. But if I did need to make the move a week early, because let's say Declan Rice was a doubt for Everton, or I felt quite strongly that his minutes might be managed, then I think that brings Sharda and Tavernier well into the mix, because as a combination of 2 fixtures, I think they stand up very well up to Fulham's fixtures. So Nottingham Forest away and Burnley at home for Fulham is very, very strong. But obviously Burnley at home is the stronger of the 2. But then Sharda's got Wolves at home followed by Leeds away. That's not bad, although Wolves have been in very good form recently. And Bournemouth, probably more temptingly, Burnley away, followed by Man United at home for Tavernier. Now, his data has taken a big jump up since game week 29 because he had a phenomenal performance against Brentford. He was so unlucky not to get an attacking return. I think he put up 1.43 XGI in that game, had a couple of massive chances, probably should have had a penalty as well. I don't know how owners didn't get a haul out of him. So if you went there, very, very unfortunate. I am sorry. But against Burnley away, you've got to be feeling good about his chances of getting a haul in that one. So I think if I were to move early and Declan Rice was a risk for this week, Tavernier would be right up there with Harry Wilson. And of course, there's still a doubt around Wilson. So we should get more info. He might play against Southampton in the FA Cup. So we might know that he's fit ahead of time. But I think the call between either Wilson or Tav, if you're making it in game week 30 rather than 31, is a very, very close one. And given that Tavernier's got penalties, I might be inclined to say that he might slightly be the better pick, considering both of them play Burnley in those 2 weeks. Okay, so let's wrap up the video by taking a look at my team once again. Now, I will say that if all of the things go to plan in game week 30, or in the build up to game week 30 rather, let's say all of my players playing in Europe get through unscathed. I think that Rice is pretty comfortable to have good minutes against Everton. Same with Timber. Same with Erling Haaland against West Ham. Then I think I can roll this team. I don't want to rush a player in like Tavernier or Wilson for Rice, for example, if I feel like they get good minutes. Or if Man City do go through against Newcastle, obviously they're still very likely to blank, in fact, certain to blank in game week 31. So it makes it much less likely that I want to make the Semenyo move from Burmo, because of course, why would I want to bring in an additional player who blanks, considering I've already got 5 players who are problems for me in game week 31, namely Gabriel, Timber, Rice, Haaland, and then Mark Giu on my bench who doesn't ever play. So I can't really afford to bring in Semenyo if they do blank. But on the flip side of things, if we know that Man City are definitely going to blank in game week 31, and we'll get that news before the game week 30 deadline, if they do progress against Newcastle, then Erling Haaland out, potentially, if I think those minutes are going to be managed against West Ham, considering the Real Madrid matches either side, him out to enable a move for Salah, and obviously Joao Pedro at the same time, could be quite tempting. So I'm going to wait and see what happens with the FA Cup results. I think that's really, really important. And then also how the players get through that first leg of the Champions League before making a final decision on my game week 30 transfers. But like I said, if everything goes as expected, I think I can roll this team. And I think I'd be pretty happy taking 3 free transfers going into game week 31 and then getting rid of a number of those blanking players for just one game week, like Declan Rice to Harry Wilson, for instance, maybe bringing in another defender for Timber, and maybe getting rid of Erling Haaland for another striker that I like the look of, let's say Joao Pedro that week, or maybe Ekitike. So I think I'd like to roll. But let's see how the FA Cup results go. Let's see how the Champions League games go, because that could make me want to pull the trigger on one of those 3 combination moves a week early. Anyway, as we get to the end of today's video, hopefully you've all enjoyed it. If you have, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like, hit subscribe if you're new around here, and as always, drop any comments below and I'll try and get back to you before the game week 30 deadline.